The chairman is not here, so I'll be chairing the meeting on his behalf. Information papers issued since last meeting. After the regular meeting on the 14th of December, the panel has received a total of 8 information papers, which are set out in Agenda Item 1. Item 2. Yes. Ms. Tanya Chen. Chairman, on the 11th of January, I submitted a letter to the chairman, Mr. Chen Han-pan, talking about the quality of the Central Western Wan Chai Central Bypass. I believe the Secretariat has received it. I wonder whether we have the chance to discuss that. The reason being that the Central Wan Chai Bypass is soon to be commissioned, but the quality of the concrete is of concern. And today there are newspaper reports talking about the new air dehumidifier is not as good as what was expected, and many countries have given up that device. So I hope that we can get a chance to discuss here. And also the Economic Times, there is also a column. The columnist is the former assistant to the Ms. Christine Low, the former Undersecretary for Environment. So I hope that we can discuss that. Well, the chairman has received your letter and he is considering whether to include that item. I will once again relay your views to him. Well, if there is no further question, then item 2, items for discussion in the next meeting. It will be held on the 15th of February 2019. The administration proposed to discuss 2 items. One is review of penalty level for illegal carriage of passengers for hire or reward. So you can look at item 1 in the list of outstanding items for discussion. The second item is the fare increase applications by Kowloon Motor Bus Company and Long Win Bus Company Limited. That's on item 2 on that list. Item 3, report of Independent Review Committee on Hong Kong's franchised bus service. I believe that you have received the relevant papers, and the IRC has also submitted a full report to us. So can we now invite the administration team to join us, please? And I'd like to remind members that in accordance with ROP 83A, if members have a direct or indirect pecuniary interest in the matters to be discussed, please disclose the nature of that interest before you speak. So the government team, welcome. From the administration, we have Mr. Frank Chan, Secretary for Transport and Housing, and then Ms. Mabel Chan, Commissioner for Transport, Deputy Secretary for Transport and Housing, Mr. Kevin Choi, and a team of government officials. Good morning. Members would like to speak, please press the request to speak button. So can the administration team brief us, please? Thank you, Chairman. In February 2018, there was a fatal accident involving a franchised bus in Tai Po Road, and the government has established the Independent Review Committee on Hong Kong's franchise bus service in March to comprehensively review the operation and monitoring of franchised buses to ensure that Hong Kong's public bus services are safe and reliable. And in last Monday, the government has released a report of the IRC, and they have talked about the relevant monitoring system. And a total of 45 recommendations under 16 areas have been raised. Safety is of utmost importance in our public transport policy, and franchise buses are the major means of mass transport on road apart from railway. We must ensure that they are safe in their operation. The government has studied in detail the report and will fully follow up on the recommendations of the IRC. We will proceed in full steam with various safety enhancement measures to further enhance franchise buses' safety. On every recommendation, we have given comprehensive and positive response, and the details are set out in the paper. I will not dwell on that. Together with the relevant policy bureaus, departments, and stakeholders, we will implement all the relevant follow-up actions. And together with the franchise bus operators, we will also actively implement the relevant recommendations to improve bus safety. We note that for some of the recommendations, they will involve legislative amendment, including legislating on working hours, rest, and meal breaks for bus captains, and also there is a suggestion that there should be legislative provision to make acts of threatening, abusive, or insulting bus captains an offense. These recommendations are comprehensive. We will study in detail those recommendations before mapping the way forward. Now, after the accident in February last year, before the completion of the work of the IRC, the Transport Department has taken proactive follow-up action, including setting up a working group on enhancement of safety of franchise buses in mid-March last year. And the members include all franchise bus operators and major bus manufacturers to consider further measures to enhance bus safety. Now, the working group's recommendation is that starting July 2018, all franchise bus operators should purchase new buses equipped with electronic stability control and also speed limiting retarders. All these new buses are also retrofitted with safety belts for all passengers' seats to ensure that Hong Kong's franchised buses are safe and reliable. And up to October 2018, 474 buses are retrofitted with such safety devices and safety belts. The Transport Department has also turned this working group into a permanent setup to provide a standing platform for the relevant parties to further continue discussion on measures to enhance bus safety. And in view of the technology in relation to safety of buses, in mid-2019, the Transport Department will also set up a dedicated technology team to follow up on technological developments. And based on the RSC's recommendation, the Transport Department will also set up a dedicated safety team headed by a safety director to have focused monitoring on bus safety based on the established mechanism. The Transport Department will seek the relevant resources. The government will continue to strive to enhance the operational safety of franchised buses, and the TD will also take a proactive role in improving bus safety and follow up on the IRC's recommendations. TD, together with the relevant experts and bus operators, will continue work in 4 areas to enhance safety, including installation and enhancement of in-vehicle devices, technologies to assist safe driving. 2, enhancing the training and working environment of bus captains. 3, strengthening bus accident analysis and safety performance management. And 4, enhancing general road and infrastructure safety, as well as introducing more bus-friendly measures. Various initiatives and measures in these 4 areas are set out in detail in the paper. Chairman, we attach a lot of importance on operational safety of franchise buses. The government will implement seriously all enhancement measures to further lift the bus safety. I and my colleagues are willing to listen to members' views and suggestions. I will follow up on your questions. Thank you. Secretary, including myself, 14 members would like to speak. If we have 4 minutes for each person, we will overrun. But I believe that this is an item of concern to everyone, so I would rather extend the meeting time so that we can allow 4 minutes for each of you.
Mr. Lam Chok-teng. Chairman, it is regrettable that we need to endure so many serious bus incidents before we have this report, and we see that there are a lot of safety measures and system monitoring that can enhance the bus captain and passenger safety. But there is an important issue that has not been resolved. That is, the bus captains have long work hours and they are driving under excessive fatigue conditions. So now we have special shifts that is 14 hours of work. And of course the bus company and government will say they have a few hours of break. They can even have 3 hours continuous break. But in fact, a lot of bus captains, the bus stops they are working are not close to their home. They have to rest in parks or wait around in other areas. So they really cannot rest. So 14 hours shift, first of all, it affects their family life. They don't have sufficient rest. So when they are driving under fatigue, it affects driving quality, and even it might lead to traffic accidents. And a bus captain is holding the lives of more than 100 passengers, and there are other motorists and pedestrians at stake. So the government needs to set a timetable for bus captain work hours. They need to reduce the shift hours. And previously, the commissioner had said if you want to reduce the shifts hours, the industry will have to hire an extra 1,000, 1,200 bus captains, and the money involved is about 450 million. And if you use the MTR dividend to subsidize public transport, you're now using 2 billion for the public transport subsidy, but in the past you were receiving 4 billion dividend. So could you dig deeper and spend a few more billion and to help the public and bus captains to recruit more bus captains to enhance driving quality? Could you consider that, Secretary and Chairman? Thank you, Mr. Lam, for your concern about bus captain shift hours. As a matter of fact, the Transport Department at the beginning of last year regarding bus captain shift hours had done some follow-up work. We had also had negotiations with the franchises. We all agreed to implement the updated shift arrangements. Now we have follow-up negotiations with the franchises, and there is a consensus that when all franchise bus companies implement the new shift guidelines, we will have a review. And according to Mr. Lam Chok-teng's reference to the special shift hours, It's a 14-hour shift and there are 3 hours rest. We understand there needs to be a work-life balance, and we need to take care of those needs. Well, the secretary did not answer my question. First of all, I asked him whether he would use the MTR dividend to subsidize bus captain salary expenditure, and does he have a timetable? I need a simple answer. We will meet with the franchise bus companies and conduct a study. Next, Gary Fan. I note the IRC report mentions bus-friendly measures, especially the transport department is looking into a low-speed area. For example, in central Samshui-Po, they are identifying routes and they will try it out this year. So I want to ask the government, how do you assess implementing a speed limit of 30 kilometers in Samshui-Po? How will you enforce that if the traffic flow is not high, if the road conditions are good? Will some bus captains feel impatient, and even passengers might be impatient, and passengers and the bus captain might have some conflict? A few days ago, there was a dispute over moving luggage in Disco Bay. A Putonghua speaking passenger had assaulted a bus captain, had pulled his hair and slammed him against a wall. And in the 2017-18 statistics in the report, we see a substantial increase of attacks. A lot of attackers were not persecuted, and even if there was a sentence, it was a light sentence, the conviction rates are low. So I'm worried about this type of passenger assaulting bus captains, or confrontations between bus captains and passengers. There is a rising trend, and if we implement a low speed limit, will that give rise to more of these incidents? How does the government assess a low speed area, the implementation and the details? Chairman, allow me to answer the last part about bus captains being victims of abuse and assault. Hong Kong is a civilized society. Everybody should be protected under the law. So for franchise bus captains, if they are victims of verbal abuse or threats, it's not tolerable. We have existing laws to deal with it. So according to the IRC report, we will conduct a further investigation, and regarding the incident mentioned just now, we will discuss with the FB and install suitable equipment to record the behavior, and if necessary we can conduct prosecution. Well, the report says a lot of the incidents were not followed up on. Well, we will continue to go to study with the FBs and the law enforcement agencies. This is your report. You're not following up. We will not tolerate, and we will promote education. We'll step up our law enforcement. So I will have a commissioner respond on the low speed area. Thank you for the low speed limit area. In 1990 in the UK that was introduced, and in the Europe and US there were also some cities that implemented a low speed limit area. For example, in Southeast Asia, Seoul will also be introducing this. The purpose is to enhance pedestrian safety and driving safety. So areas that have implemented this, we see fatalities and accidents can come down by 40%. So when Hong Kong introduces this pilot scheme, we will consider the traffic impact assessment, the traffic conditions. Bus captain and passengers might have conflict. You haven't answered that. Well, Chairman, on this point, I would like to add, in dealing with passenger bus captain disputes, how to remedy the situation. There are three there's a three-pronged approach. We will rely on education. The report also suggests that installing a CCTV in the driver position. We will have audio recording. We will also strengthen prosecution, and we're following up with the police. I need to draw the line because we have 14 members in the queue who want to speak, so we need to draw the line. Mr. Frankie Yick. The IRC report is very comprehensive, but a lot of recommendations seems to target TD. They instruct you to do this, do that. It gives people the wrong impression. The franchise used to be focused on providing an efficient service, and the franchise should be responsible for safety because according to labor ordinance, they have to provide a safe working environment and prevent accidents and so on. The IRC feels that the government should do more regarding safety. Nobody's going to object to that. Second, there's a lot of hardware recommendations to enhance safety. We all agree on that, but I want you to note that these facilities, this had appeared on the market recently. So if the government could subsidize bus companies and install it in the whole fleet, I'll support that. Regarding reducing the work hours, as an operator in the past, I did similar work. We don't have any particular stance, as long as the secretary says. If the thing is, we don't have enough drivers in Hong Kong. If you can recruit, no problem. So, is the government going to subsidize more? Can you reflect it through price? And so we can discuss that. I agree with reducing work hours, but we need relevant measures. And the report recommends that we have washrooms, restrooms in the bus stops. When we talked about PTI, we had also wanted these measures, so we support that. Well, regarding abusing bus captain or legislation, I support that. In my years of operations of public transport, my frontline staff have been assaulted, abused on numerous occasions. Sometimes, if you wait for the police and you go through the courts, yes, it's troublesome. But if we could have an ordinance, an offense, I totally support it, because a lot of people can be quite ridiculous. I'd like the officials to hear our concerns. Thank you for the input. In principle, we agree with the ideas. We need washrooms, resting areas. That THB and transport departments support this, and we will require these to be standard facilities. So in the Hong Kong Planning and Standard Guidelines, we will make some amendments to reflect this. So FB and public transport environment, we hope to do a better job. Regarding legislation, I'd also like to explain that according to our existing legislation, if there are assaults on bus captains, if there's an assault on an individual, we do have laws to deal with that. So under the existing legislation and balancing that with the members' views, we need to conduct further studies. I just want to follow up on one issue, that is bus captain work hours. This boils down to whether we have sufficient professional drivers. Ever since 2012, when I started being a legislator, I've been talking about this. I hope the government can pay attention to this. Basically, we are also concerned, but as a matter of fact, we have a shortage of labor in Hong Kong. The commissioner has said that if we cancel a special shift, we're not talking about money, it's whether we have sufficient labor. So I hope we hope we can do some extra work to attract new blood to the industry. Ms. Tanya Chan, first of all, we need to thank the IRC for its comprehensive work. They spelt out the responsibilities of the government and FB, and they also gave 40 plus recommendations. So I want to ask, the government did not answer the question regarding the 45 recommendations and what is your implementation timetable. Paragraph 577 says that TD has a lot of measures to strengthen the FB arrangements, but this is just a passive suggestion. It's not an initiative. On 2018 10th of February incident, there were a lot of measures implemented, but these were just passive responses, not an initiative. So does the government have a timetable for implementing these 45 suggestions?
They have already made their recommendations. Your job is to how to implement them. So some members also about the bus captains performing their duties, and there was a news report saying that a mainland lady was assaulting the bus driver, and it was listed as a common assault and nobody was arrested. And in paragraph 650, it is said that video cameras should be installed, and there is also the suggestion of the protective cover. And we understand in KMB, they are implementing measures to protect bus captains, and protective covers are being installed. So are they effective? But then would they stand in the way of bus drivers communicating with the passengers? The protective covers can be considered because they can help protect bus drivers' privacy and prevent assaults. Secretary, on the 45 recommendations, 31 are being implemented or have been implemented, and we have plans to take forward 6 others. And for the remaining 8 recommendations, we have to conduct a detailed study. I'll ask the Commissioner to give you the timetable. Now, as to passengers abusing our bus captains, basically for 203A, but CAP 203A Public Bus Service Regulation, that's already covered. And in CAP 212, the relevant provisions can also deal with that. We will seriously consider the IRC's recommendations. As to the question of the protective cover, I would ask the Commissioner to respond. On the timetable, for the 31 recommendations which have been implemented or are being implemented, at least 10 items will be completed within this year. And the of most concern are the recommendations including installing technological devices on bus, and then also there will be the cost-effective analysis of seat belts, and then we will also be doing more work on safety performance. We will hope to achieve consensus with the bus companies by the end of this year, and on disclosing accident data in the safety chapter of the report. Such information has to be disclosed by the end of the year, and on publicity and public education, that will also be launched within this year. And also on the protective cover, we understand that KMB at the end of last year has installed the protective covers. Some bus captains' views are that the protective covers are not that fixed in their position, and that will affect their driving. But for new buses being imported, these are already installed in the buses already. So we will look at the effectiveness. I think we will add in an extra layer of protection for bus captains. We will bear in mind the bus captains' views on whether devices are effective. So can the government also tell us the timetable for the remaining 14 recommendations in paper? So, administration, please give us a paper. Next one, Mr. Alvin Young. Now, on assault and abuse of bus captains, I would like to ask the administration. Nobody would like to see bus captains being abused or assaulted, and the secretary is really sincere in saying that this shouldn't be tolerated at all. Now, on the technical side, I would like to ask, the assailants may flee after they've assaulted the bus captains. Have you talked to the police as to whether you can catch the culprits? Say, for example, can the police set up a special small team to deal with bus-related cases? Maybe they should not cover all public transport, but since they already have a dedicated team for railways, can they set up a similar team for buses as well? Can that be done? Second, when bus captains discharge their duties, they are wearing uniforms. When public officers are assaulted when they are performing their duties, the court will usually mete out a heavier sentence. Bus captains' job has to do with the safety and lives of a lot of people. So a heavy penalty should be imposed on the attackers or assailants. So would you be discussing this with the police and the DOJ? So the prosecution should point this out, particularly in a court case, that heavier penalties should be meted out. Thank you, Mr. Young, for your comment. Hong Kong is under the rule of law. I think we share the same concept. So we should not be accepting any acts which will hurt people. Under the present Public Bus Services Regulation, the bus captains are authorized to get personal information of those who contravene the regulation. But then we understand that there are limits to what the bus captain can do on site. And if somebody uses force and flees afterwards, it's difficult to deal with those cases. So there is a real difficulty. So the commissioner has talked about installing video cameras with audio capability on board. Then that will help in catching the culprit and the subsequent prosecution work. Now, we also want to do more on public publicity and public education. We talk about several thousands of buses and over 10,000 bus captains, and we travel a lot on. There are some 40 million trips every day on buses. So we will liaise with the franchise bus operators and bus captains and talk to them on how protection work can be better done. And of course, we will also talk to the law enforcement agencies and review the relevant situation and see what more can be done. As what Mr. Young said, Hong Kong transport network covers a vast area, and if something happens on a spot, the police may not arrive at the first instance. But no matter what are the difficulties, we would like to step up law enforcement. We would enhance public education publicity. We would also install more hardware to protect the bus captains. My suggestion is very specific. I am asking that the police may set up a dedicated team to deal with bus issues. Can the government consider this? Yes, we will consider that. We have a similar situation in railways. The railway network is relatively simple and is easier to handle. But then buses cover all parts of Hong Kong, so we'll have to look at the actual situation. Mr. Yu Si-wing, we have to be protecting or safeguarding the bus captains and passenger safety. I support a lot of the recommendations in the report. We have to install more devices and we are saying that we should cut down on the working hours, but then we have to pay a price. Maybe we have to pay a lot more to install the facilities. We want to turn the 14-hour shift to 12-hour shift. Has the government made an estimate on the additional expenditure? What will be the cost to be borne by the franchised bus operators, and will that have an impact on the bus fares? Have you made the calculation? And the government said that it will give a certain amount of subsidy. So the bus company's burden will be alleviated as a result. So by how much then will that burden be alleviated? On the question of manpower, apart from franchised buses, non-franchised buses are facing manpower shortage. This is a common problem confronting both sectors. The secretary said that they will think of certain measures. Do you have any specific plans to attract young people and new blood? So that you can resolve the manpower shortage problem. Thank you, Secretary. In the policy address, some $500 million have been set aside to pay for the installation of safety devices on buses. And based on the IRC's recommendation, we would also conduct a cost-benefit analysis of the installation of such devices. We don't rule out spending the $500 million as subsidy where cost effectiveness is proved. And we still hope that the bus companies can shoulder a certain portion. In terms of our transport policy, there are some other measures which would be of help. Earlier, we have said that the tunnel toll for the franchise buses be waived so that the latter can set up a fund to subsidize bus fares. And then we also have the proposal on redistribution of traffic among the 3 tunnels, and that also includes the toll waiver for WHC. Now, indeed, there is a manpower shortage in the public transport sector, and the bus captains are also aging. And we see an overall shortage of labor in the labor market. Now, for an average ordinary member of the public, after he has obtained a driving license, and as long as he has held the driving license for 1 year, he's entitled to learn to drive the buses. So that hopefully can help attract young people to the sector. Now, money can be an incentive, but on top of money, we have to look at also the promotion prospects and the professional status of the bus drivers as well. We would do more on those fronts. One word. Would you consider importing overseas workers? Secretary, that has to do with the overall labor policy for Hong Kong as a whole. We have to have detailed deliberations with the stakeholders and the relevant policy bureaus. Mr. Michael Look, thank you, Chairman. The FTU and the relevant chapters on public transport welcome the report. The report has been incorporated many of our views, enhancing public education and prosecuting those who attack or abuse the bus drivers. Now, I have to ask a question on the special shift arrangements. Right now, this is an issue that we have to face up to. We are running short of bus drivers, so if we can cancel all special shift, we have to bring in an extra 1,000 bus captains. And for some bus captains, they have to really depends on the earning of the 14-hour shift. And for some bus companies, these bus captains are fully paid for the 14 hours they work. I think the crux of the problem is that bus captains' pay is on the low side. So if the bus captain's pay can be increased, then we'll be able to attract young blood, young people. And also the bus captains on special shift have to would like to have the subsidy for that special shift. So how can you improve on the pay for bus captains? And for recommendation 38 and 38, it has to do with abusive action against the bus captains. You would say that abusive acts will be made a criminal offense. And in 38, you said that there should be specific legislative provisions to make such abusive or insulting communication a criminal offense. Do we have the legislation or not now?
So if we are to legislate, are we only going to regulate abuse, verbal abuse, intimidation, threatening? What about interference? What if I just talk right next to you? I'm not insulting. I can even in fact praise you as being handsome. So your definition of insult is very narrow. Shouldn't it be interfering with the bus captain's driving? Shouldn't we legislate that to ensure passenger safety? Thank you, Chairman. Regarding existing legislation, we are talking about the public bus ordinance. Cap 230A, it says that the passengers cannot deliberately interfere or distract the bus captain. If there is no reasonable defense, it is an offense. There could be a fine of 3,000 and imprisonment of 6 months. So when a person distracts a bus captain, we do have existing legislation to deal with it. And I said just now, in our law enforcement, the bus captain is authorized to collect the offender's information. But you have to understand, the bus captain is not a law enforcement officer. If the person causing a disturbance, if they leave, honestly speaking, there's not much the bus captain can do. So the IRC has put forward a suggestion. We understand that aside from public transport bus ordinance, we also have legislation regarding assault. So we need to study the existing legislation and the IRC recommendations. Ms. Claudia Mo? Well, of course, insult and assault, it is not tolerable, but you are aware that a bus captain on a double-decker bus, he is responsible for up to 100 passengers, so you really shouldn't distract him. So if you assault a bus captain, so my understanding of common assault, even if you throw a punch, you don't connect, but the action of throwing a punch can be determined as common assault. So whether there is connection or not, there is a bodily threat, and the maximum sentence is 1 year. You said just now, distracting a bus captain and so on, the maximum penalty is only a jail sentence of 6 months and a $3,000 fine. So we have existing legislation. So you need to warn the passengers more prominently, and if you insult, threaten, intimidate a bus captain, I'm worried that this is going to be a waste of public resources. What do you need to study? We already have existing legislation, and you are overlapping existing work. And previously we heard about insulting a police officer offense. Now, if you have a separate legislation for insulting bus captain in the future, if we have insult police, lawyers, teachers, medical professionals, do we have separate insult charges? It's very hard to legislate what is an insult. And overseas have insulting police charges. Now, even if you use the F word, they can still be non-conviction. So the government likes public education. So you need to educate the public that bus captains are serving the public. They're wearing a uniform. So please be respectful to bus captains. Don't distract them. Why do you need all this extra content? We have legislation to deal with assault and so on. Thank you, Ms. Mo, for your views. How we protect our bus captains, we are on the same page. In fact, on individual assault, yes, this is your third repetition. I'm saying that you don't need that. Thank you. Essentially, regarding, we need to conduct studies on existing legislation and the recommendations of the IRC. Do you have a timetable for your study? Just now I said that we have 31 suggestions that are being implemented, that are being studied. We will respond later. I understand Ms. Claudia Mo's concerns, whether we need other legislation. This is something that we need to look into, but most importantly, as Ms. Mo said, we need education and publicity. When the public take public transport, they need to respect our captains. I understand. Allow me to interject. I am worried. It's very popular to have insult or insolence. We have the national anthem ordinance coming, and but we haven't clarified what it means to insult. Mr. Pun Xiuping, we had a lot of serious traffic accidents in recent years, and it is of grave concern. We have more than 100 fatalities, more than 10,000 injuries. So on this occasion, we're talking about FB, and we have an IRC report. The report has 54 recommendations, and 31 are being implemented. We also have some that are being planned. 8 are in the plans. That is information provided by TD. But there is a core issue in the report that is low pay, long hours. We don't have a standard working hour. We don't have a maximum working hour. So we don't have a collective bargaining to and just now we heard that it's hard to recruit drivers, and it's because of those reasons of long low pay. If you look at New World First Bus, City Bus, when they joined in '98, their salary was $18,000, and it's still $18,000, and they had to rely on overtime work to make ends meet. So this is a vicious cycle. There are no young people willing to join the industry, and in this report, these issues were not pointed out. But no matter what, I see your document talks about working hours and rest. You say you have a guideline in 29 that will be implemented. In paragraph 21, it says the FB operators will recruit new captains and retain bus captains. They will enhance remuneration. So I want to ask, these FB operators, they have a responsibility. They cannot say that so I want to ask, how are you going to enhance the remuneration? What specific measures do you have? And second, you also referred to insulting bus captains. You said you would educate the public to respect bus captains. You say that TD will have plans with the police. Well, but being courteous should be something taught since childhood. So, TD or the government, will you work with schools, education bureau to promote a courteous culture so that the general public can be more courteous, can have higher awareness of road safety? Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Poon. So, being courteous, polite, we agree with that. So, the TD, when they promote their APIs, they will take on board your input. So in our messages and APIs, we will convey this message. So the public transport frontline workers, our bus captains, should be treated with respect if they are serving the public. Regarding remuneration, to a certain extent, FB operators, they are a commercial operation. They need to make their own decisions. From our perspective, we would like the remuneration to be reasonable. We'd like the work hours, the working environment to be protected. So when in our future discussions with the bus companies, we'll tell them to pay more attention. So we need to be strict with our time control. Dr. Kokake. The report highlighted a safety issue and a work hour issue. So TD, being a department responsible for road safety, I am shocked that the report says that TD has insufficient and unprofessional knowledge of road safety. They point out that TD and FB operators don't have a safety officer or a professional dedicated to safety. So we have hundreds of thousands of passengers in the hands of the FBs. They don't have a chief, a bus safety officer. I hear your feedback. You say that you will consider that. So when will you really implement this? Thank you, Chairman. Regarding FB or any public transport company, this is of paramount importance. We do have colleagues responsible. So the IRC suggestion is having a dedicated public transport bus safety officer. We agree with that. So in our response, we say that in this year we will arrange for establishing such a post, and if necessary, we will seek professional coordination. So we'll try to do it as soon as possible. So you'll require all FBs to have a dedicated staff. KMB had a safety committee, but it was disbanded. So when will it be stipulated? Thank you, Chairman. Just the one I referred to will be implemented in this year. The TD will establish one, and we've written to all FB operators to consider a similar establishment. Chairman, I'd like to ask, are you aware that the maximum driving hours are in the EU? Do you know what the hours are? When we reviewed work hours, we looked at overseas jurisdiction. That's 16 and 50 hours in the UK and Singapore. EU is lower. How many hours? Let me tell you, it's 9 hours. So we have a whole group of officials here. So they don't know what the safety working hours. They don't know what the working hours are in EU, and it's been proved effective. And we're drawing a blank stare from them. I feel very embarrassed, and it's that Hong Kong being an international city, we cannot safeguard workers and passengers. We're at the third world country level. 14 hours and having an 11-hour shift is inhumane. So when will we step up our game?
Secretary, we have already responded on the guidelines on working hours. After we fully implemented the revised guidelines, we will conduct a review at the same time. No, Secretary, it's not about a review. People's lives are at stake. Well, you said you will do it as soon as possible. Well, how many more lives will it take before you are willing to do anything? Dr. N. Chang. Secretary, do you know for a 4-person CSSA household, how much will they get together with the other grants and allowances? Do you know? Well, let me answer the question myself. The SWD said that they will get at least $40,000. Now, if you take into account other allowances as well, they will get almost $22,000 a month. The more I read the paper, the unhappier I get. You said that for New World First Bus in 1998, 1st of September, the basic salary was $18,000, and after the 1st of September, it dropped to $15,000 or so. Now, 6 years later, and it became $15,300. Now it's just $14,000 or so. How come? Why? 20 years. How come that the salaries are dropping? In the last public hearing held, some bus captains said that it's a question of supply and demand, and perhaps in 1997 or 98 you couldn't recruit enough people, hence the higher pay. But in any case, as pointed out by many members, a bus captain is responsible for the lives of over 100 people. If the bus captains can't make ends meet, then is it fair? A couple of days ago, I asked the Labor Department about the occupational safety of bus captains, and it's important that they get reasonable remuneration. The Labor Department said that you can ask Frank Chan. It's the responsibility of Transport Department. The workers' welfare and remuneration is based on the guidelines of the TD. So you are the responsible government department. Secretary, we hope that next time when franchise bus companies ask for a fair increase, you should put in this requirement. If you are to raise 10 cents, you would require that a certain share be given over to the bus captains directly. So if members of the public know that a certain portion of the fare increase will go directly to the bus captains, then we will accept the fare increase proposal. Would you consider that? Thank you for Dr. Chang for your comment. When we consider the fare increase applications from bus companies, a number of factors will be taken on board, including people's affordability, operational cost and the actual financial situation. We are also mindful about their income. Staff costs are also one of the factors. Dr. Zhang's suggestion is very innovative. So for every 10 cents of fare increase, a certain amount will have to be used for increasing the employees' pay. But this is no simple thing. There may be relationship between the staff salary and fare increase, but then doing it in the direct ways as suggested by Dr. N. Zhang may not be the best way. In any case, we will reflect your views to the bus companies. Dr. Priscilla Leung, please switch on the mic for her. Can you hear me? Yes. I support the IRC's recommendation to legislate on abusive action against the bus captains and making it an offense. I support that recommendation because in major transport modes, say for example ferries, there is already such a requirement. So bus captains of franchised bus companies should get the same protection. That's point one. Second, after the typo accident happened, we held a public hearing at LegCo, and I asked back then the franchise bus companies representatives, I asked why. Is it because you are suffering a loss, so you are hiring a lot of part-time bus captains, and we see a lot of problems of bus trips lost and so on. And they told me clearly that no, that's not the case. And you said that you suffer a loss, but then you also generate revenue from advertising, but then they are not in the same account. So that's why you are suffering from losses all the time. But they said no, that's not the reason. If that is not the case, why are you hiring so many part-time bus captains? Now for a full-time bus captain who has worked for 14 years, do you know that he doesn't have enough income so that he has to take on another job to drive another several hours as well? Do you know about that? No, I think the secretary's answer is not good, is not satisfactory. I asked this question back then. We have to protect the safety of passengers, so we ask that you should not be using part-time drivers all the time. You should increase the remuneration. We learned that many bus captains are already 50 years old, and the one involved in the accident was relatively younger. He was irritated. That was what was said. You have tried to enhance training, but what about the remuneration? Can you really attract people? I agree with fellow members in saying that since the work hours are so long, can a reasonable pay be given to them? If these drivers work for a commercial organization, they would earn a much higher salary. They have to support the family on an income of just $18,000 to $20,000. Why are bus companies so mean? Why doesn't the government exert pressure on them? When they ask for a franchise, we should ask them to hire a professional team of bus drivers, and they should not hire so many part-time drivers because they will easily end up in accidents. Thank you, Dr. Leung, for your question or comment. We usually talk about long operating hours in public transport, and we would like to hire as many full-time bus captains as possible, but in light of the operational needs, part-time bus captains are needed. So the bus company said that part-timers are hired not because of money considerations. in the operation of a franchised bus company, we impose a ceiling on the revenue, and any revenue above that ceiling has to be given back to the passengers. Mr. Raymond Chan, one of the concerns of myself is to impose or set up a low speed limit zones, and the administration plans to set up such zones in Central and Shamshepo with a speed limit of 30 kilometers. In paragraph 544 of the report, it quoted a study in London on a 20-kilometer speed limit, and that study shows that there has not been substantial obvious improvement when such a speed limit is imposed. So do you have any data or evidence to show that a 30 km per hour speed limit can reduce the number of accidents? I think what we are concerned about is the driver's performance, whether he is engaging in fatigue driving. And even if we impose a speed limit of 20 kilometers per hour, then if the drivers are not, condition is not good, we still have such accidents. And the IRC recommends that a fatigue management should be addressed. Why there is fatigue driving? Because there isn't enough manpower, and that's because the remuneration is not attractive, and the bus captains have to drive long hours to fend for themselves. So what you should not be just monitoring whether they are fatigued, but rather to prevent fatigue driving. Now, there is little mentioned in the report about improving remuneration of bus captains. So like many members, we would like to ask that whether bus captains' remuneration can be improved without having a fair increase, so that the bus captains do not have to work overtime to fend for themselves. And also in the renewal of franchise, can conditions stipulating the maximum working hours and minimum wage be stipulated. And also the bus companies should also be regulated on the pay rise for their senior management. And the secretary said there are already laws which govern abuse against bus captains, but whether they are effective has to do with the effectiveness of law enforcement. We should educate our Hong Kong people from a young age, but in fact, recently there are many tourists who are abusing the bus captains. Their culture is different from ours, and they don't know about the penalty for such acts. So I think we should have public education among these tourists as well. We should not just educate the Hong Kong public through APIs. I have moved a motion, and I would appeal to support from members. On remuneration, in the recent past, we have been urging the franchise bus operators to do more in improving the bus captain's remuneration. They have done a lot in increasing the pay and the remuneration. We hope that they can continue with their efforts. As for work or publicity among tourists who are abusive to bus captains, apart from publicity and public education, we also plan to display notices in conspicuous locations on board to remind passengers that insulting and abusing bus captains is an offense. So attack, of course, it should not be tolerated as well. Next is my turn. I will be very quick. Just now, the Deputy Commissioner referred to a maximum driving hours of 16 hours, and Hong Kong has 14 hours. So Hong Kong is more sort of lenient in a way. But, well, in the UK, are the rest hours after the 16 hours of driving mandated? Well, let me say something more about the work hours. We have taken reference from overseas jurisdictions. There are two issues involved. One is the work hours, and the second one is the actual driving hours. Well, for work hours, Singapore is 14 hours, same as ours. UK 16, US 15, and Australia some other hours. You haven't answered my question. Well, when it comes to driving hours, I'm not asking about the driving hours, Deputy Commissioner. I'm talking about rest hours. Before they begin work, are there the rest hours mandated? And after their driving duties, are their rest hours mandated? In the UK, there is this requirement that there should be a rest day after 7 days of work. Well, Commissioner, I'm talking about 7 days of work. I'm talking about 16 hours of work before and after. Well, if you don't have the answer, don't give me an answer. I have information on EU. Well, let me start again. Well, 10 hours of rest in UK. Well, and Australia, 7 hours. Well, let's not just look at 17 hours. Well, there are only 24 hours a day, so if they worked 16 hours, there is only just a rest of 8 hours. So that means, well, they still have to spend time on traveling, so that means that they can't rest for 8 hours. In Hong Kong, we have 14 hours, and there is a break of 3 hours.
So you only have 10 hours at night, but then that includes your travel time back and forth. So you cannot compare like that. The whole TD guideline has only one page. The Civil Aviation Department has an arrangement of 371, 67 pages regarding the shift arrangement. And of course, there is the time difference. So when you compare to other jurisdictions, you have to, let's say you say 14 hours Hong Kong, it's shorter than 16 hours, but there are stipulations how much rest time before the shift starts and how much rest time after the shift ends. So that's why when I talk about shift, you need to have fatigue experts to provide input. But some people would say it's only a bus driver, they are not an aircraft pilot. But it doesn't matter what machine you're operating, whether it's a bus, taxi, or plane, they are still responsible for passengers. That's why I want to have it scientifically based and medically based. We're not talking about hours, and we're not. It's not a negotiation where you have a staff side and the employer negotiating. No, there should be a scientific basis for the shift arrangements. You can see it's not rocket science. So you can see the IRC is talking about the same thing. It's just that when I bring it up, you want to play it down, but now the IRC has said it and you need to comply. But I am disappointed that on page 7 in the table, it says that the TD will consider. So I want to ask the Secretary, why do you still need to consider? Thank you, Chair. Chairman, we will review the shift guidelines. So the Commissioner had said on many occasions, we will consult the fatigue expert, and in drafting the work hours, we will bear that in mind. So in the future, this year, when we implement the new guidelines, we will conduct a review. The review work will be completed by 2020, and I hope that there will be a satisfactory result. Mr. Kong Zheng-yu, a few days ago, a Mandarin-speaking passenger assaulted a bus captain. I wrote to the police to conduct an investigation. But if we look at 2015 to 2018, there were 180 incidents of assault on bus captain. How many cases will lead to conviction and imprisonment? Commissioner, we have, I just want to figure, 75 cases were successfully prosecuted and convicted. How many were sentences? You have to understand that under the public transport ordinance, if you insult a bus captain, there's a sentence of 6 months. So have there been sentencing information? Let me tell you, there was none. There were no imprisonments. So if the legislation to protect bus captains from insults are very weak, if you look at Australia, if you look at a penalty, if there's a distraction, the attacker might receive a 20-year plus sentence. There's also a reward for people who report the incident, so they have a very strict laws. So if we look at our review, we see paragraph 35 says the TD and police will follow up on long-term publicity and education. So if bus captains are insulted or distracted, well, if you just look at protection for bus captains, shouldn't Hong Kong move along with the times and make some legislative amendment? Let me add, well, this is a public transport ordinance, and it is to prevent a bus driver from distraction, that we have a prison sentence. This sentence is made by the courts, so I understand Mr. Kwong's concern. So Hong Kong society can reflect our views. I think the DOJ is aware. Let me supplement the figure. There were 75 convictions and 15 were sentenced, including they were. So this is a strong message. So we've seen on the mainland where bus drivers lost control of the vehicle because a passenger attacked them. So if our laws are out of date, will you try to update our penalties? If the maximum fine is 3,000 and if we have a short imprisonment term, now is that sufficient? The case a couple days ago, there's still no arrests. That's why I raised this question. So how is Hong Kong performing? Versus other jurisdictions? So we were talking about the public bus. We also have offenses against the person ordinance. It states very clearly that in Cap 212, Clause 39, any person who assaults causing actual bodily harm, there is a maximum sentence of 3 years. So the bus captain's protection is not just limited to the public transport ordinance. I want to repeat, Hong Kong has the rule of law. We respect the law. So the court's ruling will consider the conditions. If we are not aware of the conditions, we cannot make. It's not fair to make a comment. I'd like the secretary to explain the bus enhancement measures, including bus priority measures. There are some dedicated bus lanes. How do you implement that? So if they embark and disembark at the bus stop, it's hard for them to pull out, and we have congestion, and these are black spots. The passengers want to get off and the bus captain doesn't allow them to get off, and we have disputes. We also have problems when passengers embark. So if it can be enforced, I will welcome it. So let's say we have a private vehicle. Jeremy Tam, you need to move out of the space. Otherwise, how can you have a dedicated bus lane? Well, usually I don't occupy bus lanes. Well, we encourage public transport with having a priority. We have 90% of the public using public transport, and this will be our policy. So I'll defer to my colleague and on explaining the bus lane priority. Well, we do have some dedicated bus lanes, ingress egress points, so buses can have a priority. But we've also looked at other jurisdictions such as Singapore and Australia, so where they have when they have a bus stop, buses are moving slower, but so when the bus pulls out of the station, they have a difficulty. So they will use signage and reminding vehicles that are traveling near the bus stop need to slow down so that the buses can depart safely. So in our design, we want signage to meet Hong Kong traffic conditions. So we will choose specific areas where when they pull out, the traffic is faster, and we will have signage at the curbside and on the road itself, reminding motorists. So we'll see what the effect is with motorists. I understand. There could be a string of buses at the bus stop, embarking, disembarking. So could you extend the length of bus stops? We see that a lot of times next to the bus stop where we have landscaping, if you were to remove the landscaping and lengthen the bus stop, that could help solve the problem. Well, our engineers do look at these issues, and you have to look at it case by case. You have to consider some redesigning. So, as you said, if we relocate the planters, you can make a longer bus stop. We might be able to accommodate 3 buses. So this is something that is ongoing. So I suggest that we have a quorum now. So let's deal with the quorum, and then our colleagues can speak. You want to continue? Okay. Chairman, first of all, the report. After the typo incident, the government set up the IRC in March, and we have a report by December. So the overall recommendations are very comprehensive. We also see that there are some high-tech recommendations, and even with the 14-hour work shift, the IRC said that whether a 14-hour shift is safe. These are all very clear messages, and I believe the government will take the relevant improvement measures. So we also see the bus captain remuneration. This is also a market economy issue. We have to consider real conditions, and this is something the FB operators will have to consider themselves. So the report has made an outline. They have a direction, a timetable, and they were able to come up with a report in 9 months' time. So I would like the government to also implement the recommendations within 6 months if possible. My expectation is that, can you give us some specific measures in 6 months' time regarding work hours, for example? Can you set a standard? And I'm very concerned about this because long work hours lead to fatigue, and it impacts operations. The second question, the report talks about technology, monitoring technology, but it lacks the human element aside from the bus captain. We know that for marine craft, there is support staff. For aircraft, there are other support staff. And for subways, the stops are very short. But the bus captains are lonely occupation. When they are faced with insults and assault, where can they seek assistance? So I agree with Dr. Zhang Laiwan. We have CSSA recipients who received 22,000, and they are driving a vehicle and they are being insulted. Who is there to help them? When I was a child, there were ticket sellers. So we have a bus captain being responsible for the safety of 100 passengers. Shouldn't he have an assistant? Well, I'm concerned about the cost, but could you consider having some CSSA recipients work as bus captain assistants? It's better than doing nothing, sitting on their hands.
Well, since the government is giving out CSS payment, why can't we consolidate the resources and do that? So, well, we can give them some training and then give them the jobs. So this is my comment. Mr. Peter Shiu, you are the last one. For the past decade, I have received numerous complaints from people saying that there are delayed trips. And every time I will report to the Transport Department, your colleagues are good, and they try to get to the bottom of the matter. And then after the investigation by the Transport Department, the delayed trips situation will improve. So very often, the lost trips are because of shortage of manpower. Maybe the bus captains fall sick and there is no relief bus captain, and as a result, there are lost or delayed trips. This, you have to address the problem of manpower shortage. Manpower shortage is prevalent among all sectors, and some fellow members have talked about long working hours. I'll talk about that in a minute. I think the crux of the problem is we lack bus captains. Now, after we've made a complaint, the situation get improved for a couple of weeks, and then the same problem resurfaces. So it seems that there is nothing much that members of the public can do. Now, technology is so advanced, and we know where the buses are real time. So it's not reasonable that we are not given the information on the buses location real time. Many years ago, different cities around the world have already implemented such real-time system. Hong Kong is an advanced city. How come that Hong Kong is not implementing that even now? And there are so many apps, programs, which can tell you the real-time location of the buses. So the bus companies are not doing that. So we can monitor bus companies by leveraging on technology. And what monitoring system do we have to monitor the bus companies? Now, I have 3 points further to make. And some fellow members have moved motions, say, asking that the TD to reduce the work hours to make it less than 14 hours. If the bus companies have sufficient manpower, they will not ask their colleagues to work OT because that involves extra pay. So the root of the problem is manpower shortage, and you refuse to import overseas workers. Of course, if the bus captors work fewer hours, the better it is for them. But then the trade union members don't like to do that because they will suffer from a salary cut if they work fewer hours. So if they approach us, if their work hours are cut and they get lesser pay, and what can we do for them? I think the bus captains need an income. Of course, safety is also important. So the crux of the problem has to do with manpower. So that's what I want to say. Any brief response? Thank you, Chairman. We do monitor on delayed bus trips. If upon receipt of complaints, we will investigate. There are many reasons. Maybe there are bus accidents, and the bus captains fall sick, and so on and so forth. There are different reasons behind delayed trips. Commissioner, I would also like to say something about the review on the guidelines on work hours. Some members have asked the question based on the recommendation of the IRC. We promised that we will monitor to make sure that the bus companies will implement fully the revised guidelines on working conditions. In the past few months, the bus companies have worked hard to have more people. And in order to implement the guidelines in full, an additional 250 bus captains have to be hired, and they are already working on that. At the same time, we would also try to identify fatigue management experts. We will also review the present situation, take reference from overseas practices, and we will look at the work hours and driving hours and see whether the 14-hour shift should be changed. We would also be conducting an analysis on the safety aspect. We would look at the extra finances required. A full-fledged review will be conducted. Our aim is to complete such a review within 2020. So all members have spoken. 7 members have moved a motion. A total of 8 members have moved 6 motions. So the wordings of the motions have been tabled. I believe that these motions are related to this agenda item directly. So first of all, members do agree that we should handle or deal with these motions. Yes? How come that some of my motions have not been tabled? I only see 1, 2, 3, 5. I've counted them all. Maybe some of them are at the back of the paper. Well, we'll work on those as well. So let's first now begin dealing with the motion. The first one is moved by Ms. Tanya Chan, Alvin Young, KWOK Key. So who will take us through the motion? Yes, Ms. Tanya Chan. In accordance with House Rules 22P, if you don't mind, because it's already shown on the screen, let's not read it in the interest of time. So the first motion, I'd like to remind members that only members of this panel can vote. So I'll now put Ms. Tanya Chan's motion to the vote. So can we ring the bell, please? Well, does Ms. Tanya Chan claim a division? So that's why I asked you to ring the bell. Well, we can claim a division, but we don't have to ring the bell. No, we said that we don't want to read it out. Well, we don't need to ring the bell for 5 minutes to ask members to return. No, there is no need to do that. If there is no further question, so let's have vote. And division is claimed. Well, we have a quorum already, so there is no need to ring the bell. We have the quorum. There is no reason for ringing the bell. Well, a member has asked that the bell be rung. I think it's just a question of time. All right, then let's have the bell rung, please. Let's have the bell rung for 5 minutes. A point of order, Chairman. It's already 12, close to 12:30, and we have an agenda item on Cheung Kwan O Lam Tin Tunnel. Do we have sufficient time to discuss the next item? As I said at the outset, that I believe that we can extend the meeting time for 15 minutes. At the outset, I already said the meeting time will be extended. I've already asked the government officials, they can stay till 1:15 p.m. So that's why I said that let's not ring the bell. But since a member has asked for the bell to be rung, then that has to be done. Can you explain the point of order? Because a member has asked for the bell to be rung. Mr. Raymond Chan? You said that the meeting will extend to 1:15, so will all members be allowed to speak if the item cannot be finished? Will the item be discussed again at the next meeting? I'll see how many members would like to speak first. There is no need to read it. It's not a must. But if Ms. Chan would like to read it, well, since we have remaining 2 minutes, well, the current guidelines on bus captains' working hours, rest times, and meal breaks allows for the arrangement of special shift, and as a result, many bus captains have to work 14 hours a day. Excessively long working hours will lead to fatigue driving, will also jeopardize public safety. The report of the Independent Review Committee on Hong Kong's franchised bus services also criticizes the TED for allowing the special shift arrangement, and that will increase the risk of fatigue driving. In light of this, the panel asked the TED to immediately lower the 14 hours in special shift, and the TED should also ask the franchise bus companies to provide competitive salaries to bus captains to ensure that there are sufficient bus drivers to provide the services. And the bus companies should not use the excuse of insufficient manpower to force bus captains to work excessively long hours, disregarding people's safety. We also asked the TD to use more scientific method to review the arrangements under the guidelines, and in reviewing the guidelines, they should also consult experts who are well versed in fatigue work. And Dr. Junior So has also moved a motion, and has been copied and is now being distributed to everyone. Mr. Poon, so how many motions do we have in total? 6 in total. All right, let's begin to vote. On the first motion. Any member who hasn't voted? Please check your vote. Voting is closed. Display of results. For, 3 against, 2 abstentions. I declare the motion passed.
Second motion, Mr. Lam Chok Teng's motion. We don't need to read it out. Let me read it out. We urge the government to take dividend from the MDR to subsidize the bus companies to offset the extra expenses for canceling the special shift arrangement. We'll start voting. Has anybody not yet voted? Please check your votes. We'll stop voting and display results. The results are 6 for, 1 against, and 15 abstentions. I announce that the motion has been carried. Then we have Dr. Anjiang amending Mr. Lam Chok Teng's motion. We urge the bus companies to cancel the special shift arrangement and substantially increase the remuneration of bus captains so that they have sufficient rest time and to ensure passenger safety. So let's vote. Anybody not voted yet? Please check your votes. And we'll stop voting and display results. The results are 17 for, 1 against, and 3 abstentions. I announce that the motion is carried. So we don't need to vote on 3, and we now move on. Motion 4. Mr. Chan Jixin. I won't read the whole thing out. The gist of it is that we hope that there should be publicity and education regarding the necessity and importance of courtesy to bus captains and how it affects passenger safety. So let's vote. Anybody not voted yet? So please check your votes. We'll stop voting and display results. The results are 21 for, 0 against, and 1 abstention. So I announce the motion is carried. Then motion 6, Mr. Junius Ho. Will you read your motion? Mr. Junius Ho, are you going to read your... Okay. We know that, put simply, the bus captain working solely lacks assistance. So if we can have a passenger ambassador provide assistance that can enhance quality and safety. So let's take the vote. We'll vote. Anybody not yet voted? Please check your vote. We'll stop voting. We will display results. 11 for, 4 against, 7 abstentions. I announce the motion is carried. Just now, Ms. Anne Chang's motion, I didn't realize you had changed the order of the motion. If I wrote it incorrectly, could you amend my error? It will be reflected in the record. I cannot amend that. The next item, we have free flow tolling system for Zhongguanou Lam Tin Tunnel. So we have officials in attendance: Dr. Raymond So, Under Secretary for Transport Housing, Ms. Ivy Law, Mr. Michael Leung, Mr. Sunny Low, and other government officials. So let's walk them in. So we can now press the button to talk. I'm really late in the queue then. Can't help it. Everybody. Well, I was sitting here all day long, and you didn't allow me to press the button, and now I'm the last speaker. I should have asked them to activate the button earlier. Well, without further ado, let's hand it over to the Undersecretary. I have a short introduction, Chairman. We want to seek views on funding application for upgrading 823TH Zhongguanou Lam Tin Tunnel to Category A to construct a free-flowing tolling system for collection of tolls at Zhongguanou Lam Tin Tunnel. So we want to implement this scheme, and we seek your views. Because of topology constraints, we won't have a tolling plaza by 2021, and the government would look into the feasibility of FFTS, and the CEDD had commissioned a consultant study and carried out field trials. So at middle of 2018, these were completed. So by the beginning of at the beginning of this financial year, we will be seeking funding, and by the end of the year, we will be starting construction. Now, this is going to be part of Route 6, so we recommend having a uniform fee, toll fee of $3. And this is because we want to await the results of the congestion study. So after the study, we might adjust the toll. So TKO LTT is an important tunnel. FFTS, we don't need the vehicles to stop to pay the toll. So after implementing FFTS, we will be implementing this in the remaining tunnels by phases, and we will be submitting a legislative amendment this year to provide the legal basis for implementing FFTS. So I'll now defer to my colleagues to give you details of the plan. I'd like to stop here for a while. I think everybody has read the papers. So let's skip this and go directly to Q&A. And another thing is, because of time constraints, I would like your approval to let the meeting run till 1:15. So 3 minutes. Thank you, Chairman. In the past, we talked about government tunnels. You know that Zhongguanou residents, because of housing needs, so the government insists on the $3 toll, even though it's not a lot of money. But the government should cancel the toll fee together with other toll fees. So regarding the new system, I have two questions. How much did it cost in research and development? Let's say if there is a cost recovery that we need to recover from motorists, that would be quite a big expenditure. The third, this technology, compared to the existing system, how are they compatible? If we have two parallel systems, we'll have a lot of problems arising. Does the government have a foolproof plan for combining the different electronic pay systems? Thank you for the question. Regarding the last question on technical issues, I'll have TD colleagues explain the operation of the toll system. They will explain that the systems won't interfere with each other. Now, regarding government tolls, it's based on a few principles. First of all, we rely on user pay, and second, we have to look at traffic conditions, public's affordability. We also that's how we levy the tolls. So we have to consider the major criteria we talked about just now, and as I said in the beginning, there is a congestion fee, and we will review the overall toll fees in Hong Kong based on these criteria. So the TKO LTT budget, we forecast that it will be 330 million. This involves a lot of initial work, some upgrading, infrastructure. So when we implement to the rest of the tunnels, the initial investment can reduce the burden in future schemes. Do motorists have to pay? While they use the tunnel, they have to pay. Do they have to pay for the system? In this financial year, we would like to seek funding from Finance Committee, and after the funding is passed, we will implement works before the end of the year. Do the motorists have to pay? Mr. KWOK, time constraints. I cannot the motorists don't have to pay extra. Next is Claudia Mo. I'll have to draw the line after that. Thank you, Chairman. I want to clarify. I really can't fathom the government's thinking. Just now, we heard about 36 billion Central Wan-Chai link. It's a tunnel. 36 billion, and there's no toll fee. But in the Lam Tin tunnel, it's 330 million to collect $3 per vehicle. Is it really worth it? Wouldn't it be better to not charge a toll? So you're spending 330 million to collect $3 from each vehicle. Thank you for the question. In answering Dr. Kokake's question regarding the toll, I mentioned the government's toll fee is based on a number of criteria. The Zhongguanou tunnel is collecting $3, and if TKO LTT we don't collect a toll, will that lead to more traffic in the free toll? Well, the Wan Chai bypass doesn't charge a toll, and you will attract a lot of traffic, and you're not collecting a toll. The Wanchai Central Bypass purpose is to divert Island West and Island East traffic. So from a management perspective, there are a series of criteria. Mr. Aolok Kim, and I have to draw the line. I want to follow up. You said that you want to collect a toll and it will be automated, but the transport panel had a discussion and they were concerned about privacy issues. So you want to implement the FFTS? My understanding, the vehicle, when they pass through, they don't have to pay. But if you want to collect from them, you will be collecting their personal information. But then in your previous scheme, you said you won't collect personal information. So how do you ensure that motorist information is protected? Now, the paper does talk about the IVU. You have conducted privacy issues. So what have you assessed? What are the contents? Can you disclose that for us?
And then I have great doubts on whether the privacy risk can be properly managed. If you don't charge a toll, then there will not be any privacy risk at all. So would you consider not charging a toll at all? Would you consider waiving the toll altogether? Now, the toll proposed now is quite low. You also have the principle of user pays, cost recovery. So that's why you are charging a toll. Have you also taken into account the financial return in coming up to the $3 proposal? Can I ask my colleague to use a couple of PowerPoints to talk about the charging toll arrangements? Transport Department, please. Who from the Transport Department? Thank you, Chairman. From this diagram, you can see that if there is a IVU installed in the vehicle at the toll system, the notification is sent to the driver, and if he pays through automatic payment, the procedure will be completed. But then if the driver cannot pay for some reasons, then we will issue a notice asking him to pay in a certain period. Now, after the entire payment procedure has been completed, in our backup or in our logistics system, the relevant information will be deleted automatically. Immediately, the information will be deleted within 30 days. Next one, Mr. Pun Xiuping. Thank you, Chairman. In your paper, you said the issue of the IVUs to the registered vehicle owners will be free of charge. What is the lifespan of the IVU? What is the cost? And in paragraph 15, you mentioned that to make efficient use of limited road space and tunnels, the government proposes to adopt the concept of congestion charging and efficiency first, and the TD will undertake a study to comprehensively review the tolls of all government toll tunnels. Do you have a timetable of the study? When will it be completed? And paragraph 18, you said that after the FFTS, toll collectors will not be required, and the TD will ask the tunnel operators to arrange redeployment of the toll collectors by providing retraining for them to take up other posts. What are the requirements for these other tasks? How many toll collectors will be affected? Will their pay be affected? Well, thank you, Mr. Poon, for your question. The in-vehicle units, the tax, they are quite cheap, around $2 each. So for the first issue, of IV use, it will be done free of charge. No extra charge is required. But if there is subsequent damage, man-made damage, then a fee will be charged for replacement. But if it is natural wear and tear, then we will shoulder the cost. The lifespan of IV use can be 7 years under normal use. As for congestion charging, we suggest that in 2021 legislative year, we will consult the stakeholders. For, say, efficient people carriers like franchise buses, they are good transport modes, but for low carrying vehicles with low carrying capacities, for example, private cars, they may have to pay a higher toll. Now, as for the toll collectors, we will encourage them to be retrained. Some, in fact, toll collectors have become traffic wardens after retraining, and the pay for the traffic wardens is higher than that for toll collectors. Training is required. It's not so much about academic qualifications. They have to acquire knowledge in first aid and some other areas in order to become a traffic warden. In the past, there have in fact been staff turning to become traffic wardens from toll collectors. And for the ID tag, the tag ID, the lifespan is 10 years. Mr. Gary Fan, as to whether tolls should be charged and the toll levels, they should be implemented in order to achieve effectiveness in transport arrangements. So the government should consider whether there should be no toll for Tseung Kwan O Tunnel and also Tseung Kwan O Lam Tin Tunnel in the future. Now, it's like the first battle for electronic road pricing. Members of the public have been concerned about privacy issues. And in 2015, the Transport Panel conducted a trip to Singapore. Our observation is that the longer the ERP has been implemented, the effectiveness of such an arrangement has diminished. And since the government would like to enhance efficiency, they are expanding the scope of ERP. Now, in paragraph 4, it is said that the consultancy study has proposed that RFID and ANPR be adopted. There are worries that excessive personal information will be collected under these two systems. The government said that it is consulting the PCPD to reduce privacy risk. So I have two questions. How is the progress of the consultation? When will we have the results? And what actual privacy risk are you talking about? Apart from risk of data leakage, there may be risk of government abusing the personal data. Undersecretary, on privacy issues, I would defer to the TD colleague to take that. You refer to ERP. In the first half of 2019, we will conduct consultation. I must reiterate that FFTS, that we hope to build Hong Kong into a smart city. We want to enhance transport efficiency. So can TD colleague answer the question on privacy? Thank you, Chairman. On the progress of the privacy impact assessment, the CEDD has conducted a privacy impact assessment on the FFTS on the Tseung Kwan O Lam Tin Tunnel. It has also consulted the PCPD. And in the detailed design of the FFTC, a further privacy impact assessment will be conducted. Now, the TD has also conducted a preliminary privacy impact assessment on the overall design of IVU, which shows that no personal data privacy issue is envisaged. But then for the back-end computer system will deal with drivers and vehicle owners' personal data. And the TD is now studying reducing the risk on this computer system. And the TD will also conduct a detailed personal data privacy assessment on the IVU. Now, in order to implement AFFTS, you would apply for $330 million. Does this amount include or cover the IVU, the tax? You talk about US $2. How many IVUs will you distribute? Will it be covered under the $330 million? But for drivers who seldom use the tunnel, they will not use the or acquire the tag. So you have to pay a lot of effort in chasing up the payment. You also ask the telephone numbers be provided so that the government can chase after the payment in default. So what is the administrative cost? Because we are talking about $3. So what is the administrative cost involved? You haven't answered the question on privacy. You are just repeating what you said in paragraph 8. Before you go to the Finance Committee, you must tell us clearly how you will reduce the risk. Is the risk envisaged acceptable? If you aren't able to deal with the privacy risk, you should not be asking us for the funding. I think it's right that there should not be toll. And you said that if making the Changquan-Lam-Tin Tunnel free will attract excessive traffic to its connecting roads, thereby defeating its purpose of providing an east-west express link in Kowloon as part of Route 6. Will people just try to enjoy a toll-free tunnel? We consider only that in the buying of cars. Well, we have heard Mr. Chan's concern. We will try to give you more information on your concern. And paragraphs 21 and 22 have explained clearly about the relevant funding request. In simple terms, we are asking for $330 million to put in the infrastructure projects and the installation of the FFTS and the relevant infrastructure items. That doesn't include the RFID tags. Well, we will chase up the drivers who haven't paid under the user pays principle. We will go after him for the toll in default. We will ask them to pay within 7 days, and if they don't do that, the cost also has to be recovered. As long as the drivers pay appropriately, they don't have to pay the extra cost. Mr. Alvin Young, the ERP will help in smart mobility and building of a smart city. We understand this big principle, which is worthy of our support. But we noticed that for this system, there will be an outsourcing. And in the long run, the government will have a set of our information, and the outsourced contractor will have also our information. So is it a must that we have to outsource the operation? We don't want to see an operator or an outsourced contractor having information of all people in Hong Kong. Undersecretary, thank you, Mr. Young, for your support. You said you support the electronic payment system as part of the building of our smart city and smart mobility initiative. The government abides by stringent privacy principles, and in the design of the system, we emphasize once again many times that we would respect privacy. Even if we use the system, we will only retain information for only 30 days. We don't aim to keep personal information. Our main purpose is that in cases of disputes, the drivers may think that he hasn't used the tunnel and he has the amount deducted from his account, then that will serve as evidence for helping with settling the disputes. But after 30 days, the information will be deleted. This is in line with the current practice. The government, I must emphasize that, doesn't plan to collect more personal information, and we won't intrude upon personal privacy. The government hasn't answered whether it is a must that you should outsource the operation. Is it the case the government cannot do it itself? Well, even if there is an operator, the company wouldn't be able to get in touch with the personal data unless they have the authorization. Now, for this operator, the toll service provider, in the long run, it is in an advantaged position when other government toll tunnels are going to outsource their toll payment system. So would the government do something to ensure that this toll service provider will be in an equal position as other companies when it comes to future outsourcing? TD. The toll service provider is responsible for handling the toll collection of all government toll tunnels.
So I don't think I can get any questions, but I just want to express an opinion. The government had a discussion with me. First of all, FFTS. I have talked about it for 10 plus years. Actually, all around the world, some jurisdictions even have a mandatory FFTS. So I think the government has taken the opportunity of TKO LTT. They cannot build a toll plaza, so they're running a pilot scheme. So the focus shouldn't be whether it's a $3 toll, whether it's cheap or not. The government is actually conducting a test whether they admit it or not. So some colleagues say that the electronic toll system, whether we support an electronic toll, that is a separate issue. Even for existing road, bridges, tunnels, if you want to implement FFTS, and let's say this one is a test, so at this stage, we don't need to bring this into the argument of whether it is paving the way for further implementation. Regarding privacy, road tolls, this is the typical way toll is collected. The issue is, how do you handle the data after you collect it, whether you have confidence in the data collector. Now, Mr. Alvin Young said if you outsource it, is it problematic? Sometimes I might have more confidence in the contractor than the government, because if you give it the information to one government department, the government department might hand it to another government department, whereas the contractor will have to comply with rules. So I think the issue is whether it's necessary to collect the information and how they deal with the information. So you have to satisfy the privacy commissioner, and the public understand that if you purchase a new vehicle, they all have GPS. The manufacturer, regardless of who the manufacturer is, they will be collecting the most information. So to a certain extent, this is going to be a global trend, what you call it, a smart city, smart travel. We have to balance all these different issues. Well, first of all, thank you, Mr. Mok, for you are correct regarding the electronic toll system and the FFTS. They are two different topics. We shouldn't mix our arguments. Regarding privacy, in our submission to FC, we will explain the privacy measures that we have in place. Mr. Wilson Orr, I think electronic toll system is going to be a trend. So this will be the first FFTS in Hong Kong. I do have some questions. So no matter how good the computers are, there will be a possibility of a crash. So if this electronic system is implemented and there are errors, the motorists, if they have some how will they follow up their charges if it's in argument? So we need a comprehensive review. The government reviews always have a shortfall. I'd like to have, and third, I'd like to ask, the 330 million is just installation and infrastructure expense. I'd like to understand this regarding electronic toll. What will the administrative expense be? Will you be recruiting more staff? You are doing a lot of technical work. And the last question is, if the system really has a breakdown, and do motorists have an appeal mechanism if there is some dispute over charges? Well, thank you for the 4 questions. The operation expense, we can have TD follow up. The first question was about whether the system will make errors. Well, the motorists, they can open an app and they will be notified if they use the tunnel and whether charges have been incurred. They can also check their account on the internet to see if they have used the tunnel. And as I said, we will retain records for 30 days. So if there's a dispute, they can clarify. If they have proven they did not use the tunnel, the fees can be adjusted. So the practice is the same with our existing system. Regarding privacy, we understand legislators have a concern, and we, in our future document, we will give you a fuller picture regarding privacy, and perhaps TD can talk about the operational expenses. Regarding FFTS operation expense, we have to come up with the full design before we can calculate the costs, so we don't have the figures right now. Mr. Frankie Yik, as colleagues said, we're talking about smart city, so the FFTS is going to be inevitable. Regarding privacy, I'm not too worried. You are relying on RFID, so if the RFID cannot detect the vehicle, then they will use cameras to take pictures of the rear license. And if you're so worried about privacy, then you shouldn't be using your smartphones. Even if you switch off the GPS, they can still detect where you are. So as Mr. Charles Mok said, regardless of manufacturer, the vehicle manufacturers know where your car is. So we welcome the Privacy Commissioner to clarify the position on the data collected. Well, thank you for explaining the system to me. I have expressed that the interests of minibuses and taxi drivers and the difficulties they face. So I hope when you implement the scheme, you can entertain our requests. Well, thank you, Mr. Yik, for the 2 suggestions. I have to thank Mr. Yik for his confidence in our privacy arrangements. Our system, the records will, I'll try to avoid the driver's face when we collect the information. We've also heard from taxis and minibus drivers' expectations. Next, Dr. Elizabeth Kwok. I have been promoting Intelligent City, so the electronic toll system is one of the foundations of a smart city, so I support it. But of course, the public say that we need a lot of education when there are new innovations. As we heard from colleagues, they also are concerned about privacy. So I'm happy to hear that the government say that they won't take pictures of the motorists and so on. I also heard a question about subcontracting the toll collection service, the TSP. You rely on tech companies to build the platform and system, but the information storage and compilation, it will be outsourced. So could you explain what the arrangement is with the outsourcing company after they complete their work? Will the government maintain the data and store the data? The outsourced company won't have an extra set of information on their hands. So we are also concerned about payment. Is there an appeal mechanism? If there are incidents, do you have a hotline? Aside from the app where you can check your expenses, but if there are questions and doubts, who do they get in touch with? Could you clarify that? Well, first of all, thank Dr. Kwok's support for our work. The FFTS we will be issuing the RFID tokens in the third quarter of 2020. So I think motorists will have a lot of questions, and we will produce APIs regarding privacy concerns and operation to help them familiarize and to ease their concerns. Well, regarding the TSP, we will provide a written response. So that will help legislators understand the operation of the outsourced TSP. Now, regarding appeal, if the motorist feels that they didn't use the tunnel and they were charged, there is an appeal mechanism. But we will keep 30-day records in case there is a dispute, and that can help them resolve their dispute. So after the TKO LTTT tunnel, what is the next tunnel that will implement the FFTS? Well, we will have a comprehensive review. So each tunnel design and location is different. We will have to consider the other government tunnels. So our first consideration will be Zhongguan. So right now, the next one will be Zhongguan Tunnel. Second question is about the toll. So, for example, taxis, minibuses. How will you charge them? How do they settle their accounts? So it's not just the bus companies. It's there are also individual drivers. So you'll need to look at it from their perspective, how to facilitate opening an account. Yes, we will communicate with the industry. Okay, I don't have any other questions, and that concludes this agenda item. So AOB, no AOB, then meeting adjourned. Thank you.